Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a brief presentation of our project and its results. So I'll start my presentation, which is the brief overview of the project. Okay, great. Thank you again for being here. So we'll have an overview of the iBRoad to EPC project. Very briefly to go through today's agenda, I'll have an introduction of the project and its main outcomes. Peter Melvich from EFOI will go deeper into the project and how it worked with the various countries. Then we'll have some time for questions and answers if needed. If there are no questions at that time, we'll simply skip. And then we'll go deeper into the actual implementation of the iBRoad to EPC in 4 countries, Bulgaria, Greece, Portugal, and Spain, and have some time for questions and answers at the end. Also, if time permits, we'll have a live presentation of the iBRoad to EPC software and how everything works. So, well, we are talking about the Building Renovation Passport, which is now in the EPC Recast edition called simply the Renovation Passport. And the reason for having such a tool is really that when one wants to renovate a building, a home, or an office building, or whatever else, in practice, what we see is that it's quite a sophisticated undertaking. It's a real project. It needs planning, and we've also seen that in Europe, the majority of renovations are self-financed and they take place over several years in several stages. So we're talking about staged renovation, and when we have staged renovation, it's quite an issue to do things in the best way, not have lock-ins, as we say, in which we have a certain choice that we make at a certain point in time, create issues with the renovation steps that we want to take further down the road. There was a previous project which finished in 2020. That was iBRoad, Individual Building Renovation Roadmap, where we worked on the Renovation Passport for the first time, and we produced 2 main tools. So the roadmap, which is a scenario, if you want, a detailed scenario about how to renovate a building over several stages, and the logbook, which is a repository of building information, which also keeps this information in the sense of snapshots, so you can see where it was at a certain point in time, a certain stage of its renovation journey. But we had an issue. It was very successful in terms of the outcomes. It was tested by our own project, in the context of our own project in Bulgaria, Portugal, and Poland. So 3 of the 6 pilot countries that we have in our in iBRoad to EPC project, which is the follow-up project. In addition, it was also tested in Ireland independently, thanks to the Green Building Council, the Irish Green Building Council. Our renovation rate was significant, so the achievements in terms of energy meant a 60% average improvement. So what we could call what is termed deep renovation, really, for the buildings. However, there was a cost issue. The cost was because it required quite a lot of expertise to be put into the actual planning of the renovation. I think if I can ask people who have just joined to mute, click on mute so that we don't have noises. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Great. Yes, so in this respect, the tools were very capable and very well used. However, the cost is significant because if we want such a tool to really become mainstreamed, it means that we should have lower costs, not much higher than what we have for existing energy performance certificates in the various countries, which is quite a challenge because in some countries these can be really cheap. So how to do this? Well, streamlining the whole process, making it easy for energy experts to produce the uh, end result, which we call the iBRoad to EPC. So if you want a new form, an extended energy performance certificate, we do this by having a database of everything, every choice that can be made in the renovation plan, in the renovation journey, and to streamline this as much as possible, adapt them to the various countries. We'll see more about this later. So this would mean that energy experts can then, through the process, which is first an on-site visit, this we consider very important to actually see, actually have a full, all the information collected on the field by through an on-site visit to the building. The calculation of the current building state, this is quite similar to energy performance certificate. The definition of the renovation strategy, so how which direction will we take, how will it happen, in how many stages, etc. Calculation of the planned building states, and then creation through the software of the actual iBRoad to EPC, which is an add-on to the existing energy performance certificate. So we have the energy performance certificate, and we have an additional document, which is, if you want, an annex that creates that shows how, in what state, how many stages, and how we will renovate our building. It's an online document, but yeah, it can be accessed directly through various devices. So this is very important, and it's modular. We'll go into it further again later. Integrating work that has also been done in other projects. So we are talking about the cost, for example, for the renovation, the smart readiness indicator, the indoor environment quality. These kind of aspects are very important. So you see that there are quite a few modules, and we are looking into the addition of others as well. The pilot testing, I would say, was quite successful, as I said, in 6 countries. So in addition to Bulgaria, Poland, and Portugal, where we had iBRoad, we've also tested in Spain, sorry, I know, yes, in Spain, in Greece, and in Romania. And in total, in those 6 pilot countries, we trained 202 energy experts. The trained experts were quite positive about the potential of these tools. And in the actual testing, we had 48 energy experts plus 37 building owners working on 57 residential and non-residential building with a particular focus on public buildings, covering a total area of almost 280,000 square meters. So a very substantial area, and again, very positive outcomes here. I would like to note a little bit the fact that our project began before the recast EPBD, so there were still dialogue ongoing when we started in 2021. At the very early stages in 2024, in May, we had the final voting of the new EPBD, which foresees a renovation passport. And the good thing is that our approach is very, very much compatible with what is in the recast EPBD. Some adaptations may be needed, but in practice, it's a very good starting point for any country that would like to implement the renovation passport for its own context. So that's is it from the context of the initial, let's say, overview of the project. There'll be plenty of time for questions, but I'd like to give the floor to Peter Melvich from EFOI, who has been our main technical partner in this project, who can go deeper into the specificities of the implementation. Peter, the floor is yours, and I see you're
Thank you,
already
Ashton.
sharing. Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Once you produce such a tool, it has to be adaptable to many ecosystems, so to say, in the various member states, and this is requires a certain adaptability, and this is what I deal with. So now it works. And this adaptability, it goes through different levels. So on the one hand, of course, you have to see what is already there on consultation tools maybe, and where to position it between the EPC and this new renovation passport. If it how to adapt to the renovation practice in this specific member state. Of course, there have to be interfaces to the tools that are already there, usually the EPC software, and of course adaptation to the national legislation. And we can go briefly through these different levels. So we saw this graphic before as the EPC is usually there in every member state, and we can put iBRoad to EPC just as an annex to the EPC. This is possible. And in this case, the effort has to be very low, the effort to issue, because then the price for the issuance can stay low and we would achieve a high market coverage. On the other hand, it is possible to make iBRoad to EPC almost a full renovation passport, as foreseen in the Recast EPBD. In this case, of course, it requires more effort to issue, the price will rise, and we cannot put it to every EPC. That's not possible then. People would refuse to pay this. And the market coverage would drop a bit, but this depends on the country requirements. And how do we achieve this? This is the so-called modular approach. So what we have is this basic module in the middle, and this has all the core features, everything that's really needed to issue the iBRoad to EPC. But this can be enlarged with specific modules, and the modules are completely independent from each other. So every implementing member state can choose which modules fit their needs and which to choose. And yes, if you choose all modules, then you almost have the complete renovation passport, as foreseen in the EPBD recast. And it's also possible to add additional modules if required in one member state. Sander also showed this briefly. The way iBRoad to EPC is connected to national tools is quite easy. It's really foreseen as an annex to the EPC. This can be done very simple. So it can really be attached to the EPC PDF output as an extra page. And this page has a QR code and an URL, which leads to the online version of iBRoad to EPC. So this is extremely flexible, because in this way you can, or one member state can decide, we make iBRoad to EPC a voluntary extension to the EPC. So if people order it, they get it. It could also be decided that it's a mandatory part of every EPC. So it could really become the new renovation recommendations, well, which are foreseen in the EPC. But on the other hand, it does not have to be connected to the EPC. It can also be combined with other tools that may be there in countries. And it's always this online output, and it can be connected. Yes, and adapting to the national legislation is again on different levels. So this journey of a building usually orients with a certain occasions that are there anyway. So usually you would say, how old are the building components in this specific building? And start from there and say, okay, maybe when my heating system will be 20 years old, I will surely have to renew it and care for something new, and so on. And there's another level, the national legislation, just examples here. So maybe there will be a boiler ban in 2040, and okay, we have a European goal to have zero emission buildings stock in 2050. So we have a certain frame of legislation that is already foreseeable, even though we are not there yet, but we can already foresee future legislation, future requirements to the buildings, and we have to navigate through these. So this is the grid we're moving in. And iBRoad to EPC takes this into consideration for every implementing member state. So we, of course, we take the efficiency classes, we show them in iBRoad to EPC, and we take the real scheme from the implementing member states, and the steps, the number of steps, and when these steps are foreseen. This is orientated with a legislation in the specific country. So maybe for one country, it's sensible to have only 4 steps, for another country, maybe 6. So this is really depending on what is already foreseen in terms of legislation. And also we adapt to the renovation practice that is there in one country. So maybe in countries with a hotter climate, there's another renovation practice than in cooler countries. And okay, we can say there are certain recommendations, technical recommendations, and we have these in a database. And the issuers, energy experts, they can choose from this database and put the recommendations to the renovation steps. And once this sequence of renovations is defined, then iBRoad to EPC automatically adds these preparatory recommendations. So, and they only depend on the sequence of measures. So once you know you will install a heat pump in 2035, then you can say, yes, prepare for this heat pump in time, so it will run properly. But this comes completely automatically. And also we take on the national renovation practice in a detailed page, which explains every renovation measure in more detail. Especially we take the U values or technical specifications as they fit in the national building renovation plans. And these NBRPs, they are also required in the Recast EPBD. So usually based on scenarios or national requirements, we can take mostly U values or insulation thicknesses and recommend them here automatically. But this is always adopted to the national circumstances. And the fourth layer of adaptation is the interface, the software interface. So at the bottom we have this calculating tool, the iBRoad to EPC assistant, and it's connected to a front end, to user interface via an API interface. And this API interface allows coupling it with different front ends. So on the one hand, we deliver this standard front end, but we can also couple the assistant tool with especially the country-specific EPC software. So the issuer, the energy expert, they won't have to change the tool. They stay in their EPC software and can issue the iBRoad to EPC from there. But we can also couple it with any other tool, for example, online one-stop shops or similar things. During the project, we saw that API does not cover all cases. In many countries, there are already existing interfaces, especially for EPCs to national EPC databases. These interfaces are usually via XML or via Excel files. And we also prepared an interface to use this data coming from these existing files and import the data to the iBRoad to EPC assistant and use it there already. So we tried to make the connectivity as flexible and as good as possible. So yes, we tried, or we saw the need to have a high adaptability in all member states because every member state is different. And we want to be, yes, as connectable as possible. So thank you for, so far. Alexander, I don't know if we wouldn't have questions right now or only in the end, but yes, thank you.
Yes, I don't see any questions in writing, but I think it makes perhaps sense to continue. By the way, one good democratic thing about B2Match is that you can simply unmute and say if you want to ask a question. But in any case, I think we can continue, and we'll have time after the 4 country presentations. So maybe it makes sense when after people have seen the whole implementation, let's say, experience of iBRoad EPC. So I would suggest, I would invite Dragomir Janev from NFECT from Bulgaria to present the country experience of iBRoad to EPC. And I'll also write in the chat for anyone joining now how to ask questions if needed. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Alexander. Thanks for having me here, and it's been indeed a pleasure to join you in that on that adventure that we are having together for more than 7 years already with the iBRoad and iBRoad to EPC. So here are the examples from Bulgaria. Actually, I was very curious to listen to the interpretation from you, Alexander, and from Peter as well about the benefits of the instruments that were produced under these projects. And I fully confirm, coming from our experience, that adaptability and flexibility are the 2 key words. And that's why these instruments have been proven to be useful and feasible for application in different market environments. In our case, I have selected 3 examples to show you exactly what I mean by the flexibility, because you can have very straightforward situations, and life, however, is not that good to us in most moments. Of course, sometimes chances are good that you find a building that hasn't been renovated, that has excellent shape factor, that has excellent orientation, that start from a level that can be easily managed, and the measures at first glance are very promising. And yes, if you put that through the general overview that we are providing with the professional service related to the iBRoad to EPC product issuing, you get the right results. You'll see that basically with very standard measures, energy saving measures, you're getting very convincing results. And even in that case, where the municipality that we tackled is quite poor, quite remote, without any competence regarding NZEP or ZEB renovation, it's certainly convincing to have that figures showcased on the document that we are producing. And when we expand that information, when we show it in a very visual, very nice, easy to comprehend way in the national language, very important, we are using that in the national language, things are becoming easier. And actually, things became so easy that that project has already been implemented. And all these advices that are coming through the iBRoad to EPC software with the description of the measures and how to prepare for the implementation of the next measures throughout the roadmap's implementation has proven to be very useful, both for the designers and for the contractors that were doing the things on site. And actually, we already have the feedback from the end users, and it's quite positive. So that's one of the good experiences that we have. But typically, as I said, it's not that easy. Not that easy. And in certain countries with more dynamic history, like ours, you can get examples that your head could explode at the beginning. So this simple building, a very small building, you see, quite an old one, it's used by 3 administrative bodies with 3 different budgets. It's owned by a municipality, but it has 3 different bodies with 3 different budgets, different access to grants, one of the most negative features of our environment, and different projects have been implemented. So some of the windows have been replaced with a little less poor ones. Some of the windows have not been replaced. There are 3 types of heating system. We have a gas boiler, we have an electric boiler, and we have a heat pump. And the building is not certified as such, so we are starting from 0 point, starting to measure, starting to interview the people, starting to see what can happen in that building. But at the end of the day, even in that very complicated situation, independently if we are applying the old iBRoad to EPC instruments, toolbox, or the new ones, we get the right information and we get the convincing results that we can get the cost reduction factor by 5.5, and that's documented and that's easy to understand for everyone. For the 3 administrative bodies that are there, they can see the benefits and they can see that they're professionally approached. And it's written in a very clear language what has to be done, how it has to be done, how we can get where we want, how we can really achieve that savings, and what are the quality assurance measures that have to be implemented and integrated in the public procurement that would ensure us that we would receive the results. Moving out from the public sector and getting into the residential sector in Bulgaria, now that's the real issue that we have to address, and it's another even more complicated story, because in that kind of box, you know that every flat is owned, every dwelling is owned by a different owner. It's either people are living there in the apartments they're own, or it's rented. So absolutely, 100 different stories in a certain multi-family apartment block, and these dwelling owners are introducing energy savings measures typically by themselves. So some of them, again, replacing windows, some of them putting some insulation on some of the facades. So no unified systems, no plan, and very compromised quality of living at the end of the day, with no centralized heating and opportunity that every dwelling is heated in a different way. It really becomes a complicated story. And here we have the iBRoad to EPC, which again provides us not only with the proofs, the evidence that it really makes sense, that it really can cut your cost by here, it's 3.5 times, that it can integrate measures coming from state subsidy programs into the roadmap, and it can lead you in a place where you're certain that you're protected against any risks coming from the energy market. And one thing which I believe is very important, it also gives you advice on how to deal with your dwelling to provide the best possible efficiency and the best possible comfort and hygiene conditions, so that your health is not under risk by the typical living conditions that we have in those multi-apartment buildings. So that's where these 3 examples lead us to the conclusions, and the conclusions are quite uniform. Basically, the building renovation passports provides real flexibility and real adaptability to the condition, because they can take into account, the typical way that we renovate the buildings, because we typically do it step by step. But you can get, first of all, a clear view of where do you want to go. Then you take into account the certain condition of the building and the installation, and you can plan in the most reasonable way any single intervention, and we can adapt that to the energy policies or the subsidy schemes or the availability of financial resources, which is basically what we need to get convinced to engage into that renovation adventure, which is obviously not a simple but quite a complex process. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and of course, if you have any questions, I'm at your disposal.
Thank you very much, Dragomir. I think the presentation was complete, and you also provided a very interesting context of how things can happen in different countries. Let's stay in the Balkans, and I'll ask Eleftheria Touloupaki from INSEB to present the experience from Greece. Let me say that we also have the opportunity for a live demonstration at the end. I see quite a few people have joined more recently, so there'll be an opportunity for a live demonstration at the end if there is still interest. But for the moment, we'll stick with the slide presentation. So, Eleftheria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. Let me share my screen. Okay, so in Greece, we took the challenge to apply iBRoad to EPC, to use it in only public buildings, which, as you may know, in Greece, there is a bit of bureaucracy surrounding everything that has to do with the public government and the managing of buildings owned or used by public entities. So it was a bit of a challenge, but we received very, very positive feedback regarding the tools and the way that we have developed it, iBRoad to EPC, in order to be able to address all the challenges that may arise from buildings that are used by public authorities. So a bit of an overview from the field test that we conducted in Greece. We wanted to test iBRoad to EPC on at least 10 public buildings, and we managed to do so on 16 buildings in the end. So it was a very big achievement in that aspect. We wanted to also test it on all 4 climate zones of Greece in order to have a range of variation regarding the different needs that may arise on different climate zones, to be able to connect with energy experts from all parts of Greece. So we preferred building cases whenever possible in where iBRoad to EPC could be issued together with the EPC, because this would allow for a better integration of the recommendation measures and the energy efficiency measures with the iBRoad to EPC. And we did that by actually using our INSEB's contacts with municipalities from all over Greece. So we tested the iBRoad to EPC. Actually, all buildings have been completed right now. We tested iBRoad to EPC in Western Macedonia, in a research center, in Thessaly, on 2 city halls of the Farsala municipality. In Athens, we tested it in 2 municipalities, including city halls, educational buildings, as well as a very wide-known museum, which is the Benaki Museum of Greek Civilization. And also in Crete, we tested it in 5 buildings used by the region of Crete. Approximately altogether, the buildings that we tested iBRoad to EPC at were about 18,000 square meters. So most of them were quite large in terms of useful area, but there were also smaller ones, such as the city halls of Zefiri and Hasia, and some buildings of the region of Crete. So here is an overview overview of the buildings that we tested in. This is the research center in Ptolemaida. These are the city hall and the cultural centers of the Pharsala municipality in Thessaly. Also in Egaleo and Phili municipalities in Athens prefecture, we had the Egaleo city hall, as I mentioned before, and the cultural center of Egaleo, the Zefiri city hall and the Hasia city hall in Attica again, and the three educational buildings of the fourth elementary school, the first junior high school, and the first high school complex in Attica region again. In the region of Crete, we tested it in 5 buildings, mostly administrative buildings, and also some more technical buildings used by the region that were all over the different regions of Crete. And the Benaki Museum in Athens, which is also a cultural building, which presented the more peculiarities regarding the cultural heritage and the restrictions that are in place in terms of what measures can be applied. Some information about the case study that I will present, the Egaleo City Hall iBRoad to EPC preparation. This is a building that is fairly recently built in the 1994. It's used as municipality offices. It has a fairly large surface area of about 3,886 square meters and 4 overground and 1 underground floor. It has a relatively complex architectural morphology, and it is located in a densely populated neighborhood of Attica. As you can see, it's inside the city area. So it had in place an air-cooled chiller and fan coil units for cooling. There were also AC units for ventilation. Its equipment was well maintained. There was an oil boiler and air pumps with fan coil units for heating, and there were many different types of lamps for artificial lighting. So the energy expert examined the recommendation measures of the EPC that was already in place for the Egaleo City Hall, and proposed some renovation measures, and actually used these as a basis for planning the renovation steps inside the iBRoad to EPC. The current state of the building was an energy class D, which is an intermediate, let's say, classification in terms of energy efficiency increase. And the most primary energy consumed was for cooling and lighting, and then for heating. So the renovation strategy was already mostly pre-drafted, because there was a strategy that was drafted from the managers of the municipality. There were some measures foreseen regarding the insulation of the envelope, the replacement of all windows, the replacement of all lamps with LED ones, and the installation of a geothermal heat pump for heating and cooling, automations and building managing systems. And later they were planning to install photovoltaic panels on the roof. And this annual savings calculated from these measures was about 50,000 euros in operational costs, without taking into account the photovoltaic panels. So this was the strategy drafted in the EPC recommendations, and the energy expert used this as a basis to arrange the measures in terms of years in the future, and how the managers of the building wanted to do this, what grants were available for each measure. So the iBRoad to EPC was drafted for the building. We can see later how this renovation strategy ended up to be on the live demonstration if there is time. But the idea is that we did this in 16 public buildings of different surface areas and different uses. Most of them were offices. And the tool was received very positive feedback from the managers and the authorities that provided all the information and the material, and they participated in the field test. So that was a brief overview of the field test in Greece, and I'm available for questions if you want any more clarification regarding the field test.
Great. Thank you very much, Eleftheria. Let's go on directly with Portugal. So I invite João Cleto Formadene, the Energy Agency of Portugal, to present the Portuguese experience. João, everything okay? You can hear us, and need to share at the bottom, just below the screen where you see us. Again, and select entire screen. This is where the war between Macintosh and Windows begins to show various issues. Great, thank you. And starting the presentation. Great. Okay, we see it, and you should unmute also so that we can hear you. Oh, but now I can't hear you. Wait 1 moment. No, that's another issue. Hopefully, we heard you earlier without a problem. Let's see. No, still can't hear you. If not possible, we could move on to Spain, and in the meantime, can check with your technician if the issue can be resolved. Feel free. Ander, would it be possible for you to share your presentation?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Normally, if you start sharing, you should bypass the presentation. Oh, yeah. Okay, very good. So, João, in the meantime, I suggest if you can check the voice, and it's okay if you interrupt us at one point just to make sure that we can hear you. Okay, while Ander is presenting. And I'll be available on chat if I can help. Okay, so let's move on then temporarily to present Spain by Ander Bilbao from Cyclica, and we'll have Portugal after this. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Alexander. So I'm going to explain the implementing case for Spain. First, I will make a brief introduction of our national context. So prior to the start of our project, we have two major achievements regarding the thematic area of iBRoad to EPC. In July 2020, we had the approval of the long-term renovation strategy, which set the reference framework regarding the renovation targets for our stock. And then also in June 2021, we had a change in the legislation regarding EPC, including some more restricted requirements for the EPCs. And then also during the project, we have this major achievement, which was the approval of the EPBD in April 2024, which set these 2 years of transposition for the member states in order to define some specific elements that have great importance in the context of our project, like the new EPC certification scheme and also the model for the renovation passport. So regarding our national targets and the specificities of our building stock, the main challenges, as I said, derive from the LTRS. So in order to achieve our commitments in terms of decarbonization by 2050, we have to multiply by 12 the current renovation rate by 2030. in order to achieve 300,000 dwellings to be renovated by this year. And we have in Spain another major issue or barrier, that is that 71% of our dwellings are located in multifamily buildings. So there we have some challenges regarding the agreement process to carry out a renovation and, of course, an energy renovation process. And at the same time, we consider that we may have some opportunities in the new directive, like these new instruments at national level, the renovation plan and the database. So we may have these two, on the one hand, the creation of knowledge, of data, and on the other hand, the creation of the strategic vision on how to decarbonize the stock. And also at building level, the renovation passport, which is the main theme for our project, and also the digital building logbook. This also, we will have the new certification scheme and, of course, the update of the legislative and the financial framework in parallel to the transposition of the new instruments. So with this context in mind, I'm going to explain our field test so that you can realize that one of the major concerns regarding the testing in Spain was to take into account the multifamily buildings. So this is why from the 10 buildings where we tested iBRoad 2 EPCs, 7 of them were multifamily buildings in the Basque Country. We also considered, as in Greece, different climate zones. In this case, we're talking about the Atlantic area in the Basque Country, the continental one in Madrid, and the Mediterranean climate in Barcelona. The testing was divided in 2 phases. The first one, the test of the assistant, our tool, in 10 buildings, where we carry on a general certification process with an official EPC software, where the experts that we selected had to collect the data and enter it into the software in order to calculate the EPCs in the current state, so kind of a diagnosis of the current situation of the building, and then calculate new EPCs for each of the steps, each of the different measures that the auditors had previewed for that building. So by 2030, a new EPC, 2040, and so on. And then the results of these EPCs, the outputs, let's say, had to be entered in this first phase manually into the assistant. Then during the project, we had a second phase where we improved, on the one hand, the assistant with the feedback from the experts and also the neighbors. And more important, we worked towards the interoperability or the linkage of our tool with the official softwares. And in the case of Spain, this was done via the XML file that all the softwares produce. So here, what we can see a screenshot from the data scheme of a typical XML file, and also the data scheme that we had in the assistant for the case of Spain. So basically, what we had to do was to link the data from both databases to make them interoperable. And the benefits from this interlinkage are evident. On the one hand, the integration of our tool with the EPC scheme, with all the official software. So in this case, we are not talking about one single software, private or public, but we are talking about linking our tool to all of them. So this gives us much more spread into the software ecosystem, and also into the vision of the knowledge of the technicians that are used to work with these EPC softwares. And of course, also the interaction of our assistant with the EPC databases that at this moment are regional, but with the transposition of the directive, they are supposed that in 2 years, we will have this national database. Okay, so this is the typical example of the multifamily buildings where we piloted our tool in the Basque Country. They are, well, in this case, we implemented it in 7 buildings built before 1979, which is the year that the regulation regarding the thermal constructions entry into force in Spain. So we are talking about buildings with any type of insulation or thermal constructive conditions. This is double brick cavity wall with air chamber, and the windows, they can be both in aluminum but also in wood. For this pilot phase, we selected 7 auditors from the previous training ones. One of them was certified with Verde, which is the certification system of Green Building Council España. And we also count with 1 technician from the Opengela one-stop shop, which is the one-stop shop model from the Basque government that at this moment they are covering 23 different municipalities. So this was also an intention of this implementing phase of linking our assistant to another instrument that is defined in the EPBD as a trigger for renovation, that can be the one-stop shops. Regarding the public buildings, we tested, in this case, for example, it's an office building in Madrid, so it's publicly owned, but the use is private, and is a building of 28,000 square meters, built quite new in 2012. Then we also tested in this public building, this is the National Ministry of Spain. It's the bigger case we have in Spain in the pilot phase, with 116,000 square meters, and it's a building of 1942, so any kind of course, thermal considerations. And finally, we also tested our tool in this sport building in Barcelona. Okay, so now I'm going to present the assessment and the general conclusions we took from the implementing phase in Spain, based on our groups of stakeholders that participate in the project. On the one hand, we had the NAC, which are the National Advisory Committee. It's a group of experts that participated since the beginning of the project, and they somehow co-designed the approach for Spain of the tool, selecting the modules, and even defining different features of the assistant. Then we also count with the feedback from the auditors and the experts that participated in the field test, and with also the view of the neighbors of these multifamily buildings, and also the rest of receivers that can be owners, but they were mostly managers of the public buildings where we implemented our project. And finally, we also count with the comments of these 70 attendees of the final national roundtable of the project. So here I have classified them into these groups. On the one hand, the general vision. So here the NAC highlighted the principle of the project of integrating 2 instruments of the EPBD, the EPCs and the renovation passports. This was highly valued in the sense that they felt that at the moment there are lots of instruments at the service of the technicians and the decision makers, and somehow this approach of integrating or at least linking instruments is really appreciated, because the effort is not lost in one single instrument, but can be profited for other of them. And then from the experts, they saw that iBRoad was a simple, intuitive, and fast and dynamic tool. Then regarding the planning, which is one of the main purposes of iBRoad to EPC, it facilitates the long-term, of course, and the step-by-step renovation plan, as we have seen also in the other country cases. And from the expert side, they saw that it improves considerably the EPCs. So here, the project is also bringing added value to the current ecosystem of tools, in this case, the EPCs. And then regarding the communication, which was also an important aspect that was considered in the project, It was seen as an intuitive and dynamic communication tool by the NAC, as a useful tool for the explanation and also for transferring the ideas to the neighbors. This was a comment by the experts. And finally, from the receiver side, they saw that the assistant facilitates the understanding and also the decision-making on how to renovate their buildings with this step-by-step approach. Then regarding the market vision, the NAC suggested that iBRoad to EPC should be a voluntary tool. We should not go through the mandatory, let's say, system with the same triggers than the EPCs. This is in our case, or I think that in more cases of the countries, to sell or to rent an apartment or a building. Then regarding the experts, they saw also the possibility, they suggested to change the name to something more related to the building renovation strategy, or even more local, no, to each of the countries. And then finally, regarding the modules and the different features, the experts highlighted that they have encountered some difficulties with certain modules that they saw quite complex. So here maybe more training could be required, like the IEQ or the SRI. And then also we had lots of inputs to include new modules for our assistant, like accessibility, which is one major trigger in multifamily buildings in Spain, because well, we need to install elevators and so on. Also, the comfort side was highly appreciated, and even the acoustic certification of the buildings. And finally, well, some little adjustments or even suggestions like the possibility to download the results as a PDF. And this is it from my side. So now I will leave the floor to...
Thank you very much. Let's see. Jean, can you test now?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay,
Very good.
let's try again. Let's see if it
Okay.
works.
Sorry, I thought you were on Mac, but it was actually was on Mac earlier. So yes, very good. Thank you. So please go ahead. So João Cleto from Adene presenting the experience of iBRoad to EPC implementation in Portugal.
Yes. So thank you very much. So I'm João Cleto. I work at the National Energy Agency in Portugal, as Alexander just mentioned. So just a bit of a framework on our EPC, because this is where we linked the iBRoad to EPC projects. So we have had this system since 2013. Actually, before that, but since 2013. All the buildings must have the real estate ads and a link and a specific energy class clearly stated in every ads. This is just something that we have introduced quite early. So we have a huge database now of EPCs. We have 25% of the building stock certified. The database also includes more than 40 million improvement measures that have been identified by the experts, and we have 2,500 EPC experts registered doing this work. So we use all this information to kind of create an EPC ecosystem. So we use the EPC database in the EPC system for almost all our policies. At the first stage, we use this data to support policy making. We also use this to incentivize renovation actions, and I will just pinpoint one very important thing, which is our one-stop shop, Casa Mais, which is an online one-stop shop that can be easily linked to the iBRoad to EPC, and that's something that we have developed in concept also in the iBRoad to EPC. And then the support to stakeholders, which is very relevant because it is seen as a relevant and accurate and reliable source of information. So from banks to local authorities, the information in our database, which there is a lot of information also available to the public, is used. So if you want some more information, there is a link here in the presentation. Our policy priorities, obviously the EPBD transposition, and here our ADEN as now a critical role in the EPBD transposition in defining the technical requirements. Then related also to the EPBD transposition, the update of the EPC scheme. This is also our work in the coming years. Then very relevant, the building renovation, the implementation of the long-term renovation strategy, which will now be named the National Building Renovation Plan, and comfort improvement and energy poverty reduction, and also linking all of this to the funding schemes, which is something that we also support now in some public funding schemes. This is the energy poverty is very relevant, and also relevant for the example I will show you in a minute. And actually, we are now at ADEN responsible for the Energy Poverty Observatory and for 50 physical citizen space across Portugal. We want to use not only our one-stop shop, but also the iBRoad to EPC tool to support the kind of information that we provide to citizens in these spaces that are being developed. So physical one-stop shops. This is just a kind of highlight of a measure of our long-term renovation strategy. So the iBRoad project served as an inspiration, and the long-term renovation measures already strategy already has a measure on the creation of the Building Renovation Passport as an optional instrument that complements the energy certificate. So this is something that is already in our legal framework. The long-term renovation strategy was also a guide for what we embedded as targets in the iBRoad to EPC databases. This has been fully developed, so it's an information to the auditors of what they should expect of their building or their type of buildings in the coming decades. So we included all this information in the iBRoad to EPC, and then now going in detail to the test phase, we had mainly buildings in Lisbon, multifamily buildings, lots of multifamily buildings, public social housing buildings, and then also some large building offices and secondary schools, and a very small house in a kind of degraded area in Porto, a single family house, which was also an interesting case, but I will not go into detail on that. This was actually done by an expert that voluntarily wanted to join the project and joined and did all the work. So this is the example I'm going to show you as briefly as possible. So it's a relatively small building. It's characteristic of Lisbon. It's owned by a non-profit institution, and they rent out this in the market, but it's actually in very poor condition. So low quality envelope, no heating or cooling systems installed. Domestic hot water is prepared via small gas heaters, but we know that, for instance, one of the residents does not even have anything to heat the water. So there is energy poverty identified here, although not officially. So I mentioned already the poor state of conservation. So we start off with a class, the worst class, energy class that we have in our country, which is F. And there is this energy poverty that we really wanted to address, and it was common in most of our buildings. So the benefits of the renovation that was prepared by our expert. The financial capacity of the institution is very limited. In fact, they had quite a crisis before because of the COVID, because they are a social institution. The costs went up during the COVID, so they entered a bit in a stress. So this step-by-step approach was really welcomed by the owner of the building, which is an institution. The intervention considered the resources available, but also the highest energy efficiency ambition possible, and you'll see what the final outcome of this renovation plan was. And then we also identified several extra benefits like the reduction of the energy needs of the residents, the promotion of energy production from renewable sources, and the improvement of aesthetics and visual quality. But most important also is this reduction of the building pathologies and increase in thermal comfort and indoor air quality conditions, which were not that good. So the renovation proposal in brief terms was a total refurbish of the building envelope, solar thermal and efficient backup for domestic hot water, highly efficient windows labeled class class plus, which is a label that we at ADEN manages and certifies high efficient windows, and the biomass system for space heating. It was not thought like this, but most of these systems also impact the SRI value and the IEQ. So we had an increase in 38% in the indoor environmental quality indicator, 14 times in the smart readiness indicator, but we were starting off from a very, very low basis, so that's why we have 14 times more, and the decrease in the emissions, energy and energy costs by quite a lot. So the investment, average investment in each stage per dwelling is 3,700 euros, which is not that high per stage on average, and then an average 1,000 euro annual reduction for the energy bill. And additionally, this investment was also to make sure that the building was future-proof. The institution also lives a lot from their real estate value, so it's something that they valued a lot, that the value of their building was improved, and then also the quality of life of current and future inhabitants was very relevant also for the owners and for the residents. I will so just with 4 steps by 2050, we managed to go from F to A plus in our current energy label. So I probably will not go into detail. I think we are a bit stranded in time here, but this is just a brief outlook of the renovation steps that have been defined. So at the first, just some efficient shower head and improve a bit the ventilation system, not big. Then by 2030, already going to B minus with thermal insulation and high efficient windows. Also taking chance of the building need of maintenance. Then in 2040, higher investment on centralized space heating systems and heat pumps for domestic hot water. And then in 2050, the solar thermal system for domestic hot water and the maintenance of the space heating system. And this is the overall view of the passport, and here you can see the evolution of the indoor environmental quality indicator. So we started off in 5.4 and went to 7.1, so which is a good value of the indoor environmental indicator. And here just some numbers. I will leave it here just for curiosity, so that if you want to look at it a bit more in detail, you can check our presentation, and for any question, just get back to me. And that's it. Thank you very much. My contacts are also, so thank you.
Wonderful. Many thanks. So, Jean, you can stop sharing, and then we can, I think, spend a couple of minutes on the one question that has been set up, that has been posted. So the question is about the trigger points, and I think we can have a round again of the countries here. So I'd ask in the same order. I think everyone is here. Yes, so I'll ask first Dragomir, then Letheria, then let's, now that Joao is connected, then Joao, and finally Ander. So about the trigger points.
All right. Yes, indeed. That's a very important question, a very very, should I say, operational one, because we've seen starts and stops in the interest towards renovation measures, and that's something that we really need to address in our general policies regarding the built environment. I would say in Bulgaria, the situation is that the typical trigger point is the availability of public funds for subsidy schemes. So that's it's a nightmare. I mean, it's something that has been blocking the sustainable development for many years now. So we must make sure that there is a continuous and stable and predictable program that supports renovation and that requires certain investment in intellectual labor, let's say. So consultancy services that are targeted to really prove that the building stock could reach the best standards and a carbon neutrality towards 2050. So that's something in the realm of policy making. Unfortunately, and I don't want to sound very pessimistic, but that's also part of life. And we have a situation with the structural stability of the old prefabricated panel buildings, which is not assessed at that moment of time. We do not have reliable information about the longevity of those buildings. And that's something that can very well influence the decision-making process for the homeowners. So I see that as an untackled area that has or could be addressed in order to stimulate the renovation process. Because otherwise, if it turns out, and that's very probable, because we've seen thermographic images of the joints of the panels in those buildings, the structural condition is not good, not sufficiently good. That's going to be a huge social issue. So combining these two worlds, the structural stability and energy efficiency, with the consideration of the increased cost, but the benefits regarding the safety and the social stability, which is considering the built environment, I trust that's another action, another effort that we should make at societal level.
Great, thank you. Then Eleftheria.
Yes, I think that for private and also public buildings, a major trigger point would be this access to public funds for renovation programs. This was especially evident now in Greece because all the public buildings that we included in the field test, some of them were in the process of submitting applications for public funding scheme Electra that was running at that moment, and also some other funding schemes that are also in place. And in many cases, the managers don't have an overview of what needs to be done in terms of energy efficiency planning and the way and the process that has to be followed in order for the works to be carried away in a way that doesn't create problems in the future. And also maintenance needs that may arise, or there may be equipment that is faulty and they have to replace it, or other safety concerns. These are also trigger points for this. But the main trigger and the main incentive for them was the access to public funding and this need to have an overview and assessment of the building's needs in terms of energy efficiency improvements.
Great, thank you. And check the question I also asked you in the chat if we can have a live demo quickly afterwards. So João, experience some trigger points from Portugal?
Yes, not anything new. So also we experienced this quite visible, the public funding's access. So we were working in a specific setting, which was, for instance, multifamily buildings that are owned by a single institution, social housing or not. So it was a specific setting, but they also chose the buildings based on access to funding. But this was quite interesting because they would have to do an EPC for the buildings, which is something that they normally don't have to do because they are not doing any transactions on their buildings or on their dwellings, or not much, because it's social housing. So they don't have to do it typically, but they need to do an EPC because they had to access the funding. And they came to us and said, well, since we are doing this, we also want to know how to do it. There was really a lack of understanding of how to do it, how to plan it, what kind of measures to focus on. And actually, just one example, one of the managers of the buildings got back to us, and we made a specific session for him and his team at ADEN, explaining not only iBRoad to EPC, but other projects and other technical solutions that have been defined as good examples, and they were there just learning. So this was a very good outcome of this process, and we also alerted them for some really stupid things they had done in the process, and so it was also very useful for that.
Okay, Ander, just one moment. Yes, okay, good. Ander, Spain? Your point?
Yes. Well, in our case, just to add up on the availability of funds, and also in our case for the project, the neighbors require also the EPC to access those funds. Well, in Spain, or at least where we piloted our tool, it was a context of multifamily buildings built around 1960, more or less, and we have to consider that the neighbors, the people living there, were quite elderly. So we are talking about 70 years, something like this. So on the one hand, their needs were not regarding energy renovation, but they were regarding the accessibility to their apartments. I mean, they really wanted to keep living in these apartments. They do their daily life, and for that, they needed an elevator. So one of the main triggers we are finding in this kind of neighborhoods, quite elderly, quite block structure, and so on, is first to install these elevators to improve the accessibility. And once you have entered, let's say, into this process, which is going to be a long process, you can include energy renovation measures as a plus, let's say, of the major renovation of the whole building. No? But yeah, we did not find energy renovation as a trigger itself, but somehow could be complementing other triggers that were there. And in our case, yeah, accessibility was the major one. Also, comfort was the improvement of comfort, but this is more subjective. It's more hard to explain somehow.
Great, thanks. I don't see any other questions. I don't know if anyone wants to ask. You can still either you simply unmute and speak up, or write it in the chat. But I suggest that we conclude with a brief live presentation to be given by Eleftheria. And to clarify, Eleftheria, please go ahead. You can already start sharing in the meantime. But let me say, of course, the presentation will be on the Greek version of the software. The intention is, after the conclusion, the project finished in August, but we are now preparing our final report, and the intention is to be able afterwards to provide to interested organizations, agencies, etc., the possibility to test the software either in English, though it will be set up as the Portugal version, which is probably the one with the most modules and parameters. So that said, Eleftheria, the floor is yours. The rest of us can unmute. Just to clarify, we have time until 10:30 Brussels time. After that, the meeting should conclude, because there are others that will take place. So if you can do it in around 7-8 minutes, I think that would be ideal. So
Yes, no problem. So I will present this case of the Gallo City Hall. As I mentioned before, the current situation was an energy class D with 416 kilowatt hours per square meter in a primary energy consumption annually. So as you can see, we have here the overview document of the iBRoad to EPC. This was based on the renovation strategy that they provided us from the building managers. They are in Greek, but these are the measures that were already drafted in the future, and we included them in steps. So this renovation strategy ranges from the first step, which is in 2025, concluding in an energy class of A+ in 2035. So in 10 years' time, let's say, this renovation strategy is foreseen to be finished. So we have here the current situation, where we have the D energy class, which is the current situation of the building. And as Peter said before, here we have the navigation in the iBRoad TPC presentation document. So this is the overview page with the different steps. In each step, we can click and we can see in a very clear way which systems are renovated, and in next steps which components of the building envelope and the systems are renovated. As we can see, all the renovated components and systems remain green until the final step, which we wanted the building to be as green as possible. So if we click in each renovation step, and this can also be accessed by these titles, which are the steps as they range in the years, in the future years. For the 2025 year, we have the first measures, which is a geothermal heat pump with some descriptions in terms of technical aspects, such as the COP values of the heat pump, and also as this is a very important aspect of the iBRoad TPC, the notes for future renovation steps that are calculated automatically. So the system sees the renovation measures that we propose in this step and the future ones, and proposes some present some notes in terms of what to avoid and how to prepare for the future renovation steps that are mentioned in the following steps that are later to be applied later on. So here are the measures, the heat pump, some automation measures, also these are all technical. The energy expert drafted more in detail how these measures could be applied in a better way. And this is the case also for the next steps. So we see that in the second step in 2026, we have the insulation of the envelope. We also see here notes for preparation for future steps. So this here, it says that because we are renovating the envelope, we should take into account that a mechanical ventilation system would need to have openings in the outside walls. So this is the way that these notes are presented in the tool. And also here, the mechanical ventilation, some automation measures regarding the ventilation and monitoring system. The third step is about, it includes 3 measures with a replacement of old lamps with LED ones, replacement of windows, and some automation again, and monitoring devices. And the last step is about the installation of photovoltaic systems, the installation of electric car parking spots, and we also see here some more information regarding the cost of each measure for each step. and if there is available funding for its measure. Also information on the energy savings regarding primary energy use. So as we can see, in the current situation, we have the 416 kilowatt hours per square meter, and we in the end, in the 2035, we have a 15 kilowatt hours per square meter annually, and also the greenhouse emissions as they decline as we proceed to the energy measures. We also have information regarding the IEQ, index and the SRI as we proceed to the different steps and the different measures. We see that these scores are improved. And we also had information on the actual energy consumption of the building, which was included in the MEPS index for this building. And finally, there is this last page where we see some advice for the building users and managers on how the user influences the energy consumption of the building. So here we have some notes as advice for the users. This is the overview of the iBRoad UPC for this building, specifically the Egalo City Hall.
Thank you very much. I think it's worth noting that the texts that appear there as instructions, as advice, are pre-filled in the sense they are prepared already in the database. Of course, the energy expert can edit them if needed, but the fact that they are prepared and filled in for the particular steps is, of course, makes things, of course, much faster. So thank you very much. Thanks for everyone who attended. We have a couple of minutes in case there are any other answers, any other questions. But we know that this is being recorded and will be made available. I'm not sure about the slides, if they will be made available, but we provided them to Sustainable Places. So thank you all. The project has finished, but this, I think, was a very good opportunity to give a little bit more information in the context of this very important event, Sustainable Places. Okay, my understanding is that the only way to finish the event is simply to close the browsers. I have not found any other button doing it. So thank you, and we'll see each other in other opportunities.